Paleogenetics. They are exactly as they sound, the study of genes, but ancient.
Like our dad ancient?
Not that ancient. We're talking the analysis of DNA over 1 million years old. So not quite as old as Dad, but close. Just kidding, Steve. More specifically, we'll be talking about the use of paleogenetics by Senegalese scientist Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop. Bet you haven't heard of him, huh? We hadn't either. Welcome to Small Anthropoids. Cheikh, who lived 1923 to 1986, was arguably one of the most accomplished writers of African history. Up until this point, the history of Africa had been told by Europeans. That's like looking at a blue diamond through a red magnifying glass. Of course the diamond will appear incorrectly as purple. It is only through a blue or clear lens that the diamond will appear exactly for what it is, blue. For that reason, Cheikh's groundbreaking work in mixing chemistry and genetics with history to rewrite and reclaim Africa's history in the 1960s led to quite a shock in the European world. But that's a lot of information. Let's back it up. What is paleogenetics? How does it work? Created in 1984, paleogenetics extracts pieces of DNA from ancient or extinct organisms to give us an insight into what they may have looked like. We've all heard of Jurassic Park. Remember Mr. DNA, the cartoon who explains how the dinosaurs were created in the film? He wasn't far off. Although these real-life DNA renderings don't create dinosaurs, yet, they can give us an incredibly accurate glimpse into the past. My particular favorite are the facial restructurings of ancient humans and other anthropoids, like Neanderthals and even hobbits. Yes, hobbits existed. They were called Homo floresiensis, and were only about 4 feet tall.
Like you.
Well, actually, I'm 5'6" inches. Thank you very much. One example of these facial restructurings created through paleogenetics and cranial restructuring is displayed in the cover photo. This Egyptian woman, known as the Mysterious Lady, was recreated by the Warsaw Mummy Project to rediscover what she looked like beneath her bandages. They commissioned 2 separate artists, Hugh Morrison and Chantal Milani, to give 2 independent facial reconstructions of the same woman. These were their results. Pretty identical, right? And you'll also notice, this Egyptian woman is dark-skinned. Had this facial reconstruction been conducted just 40 years prior, this mummy might have been incorrectly depicted as having lighter skin. For this, we can thank Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop. Now, I don't want to get into flinging accusations of racism here, but I do want to touch on implicit bias. Implicit bias is often a harmful attitude against a race or identity that we are not aware that we have. It can be as simple as assuming all kindergarten teachers are women, or all old people are feeble, or that all athletic dogs are male. We all have implicit bias. In the case of Africa's history, I'm hesitant to cry pure racism, in that old European historians knowingly misrepresented Africa, although that is a possibility. But because some might have had the best of intentions and were unaware of their implicit biases, which are a very modern concept, I will give the benefit of the doubt that this portrayal of Africa's history was a result of implicit bias, or negative views European historians did not know they had. In other words, only innocently racist. And incorrect. One of these implicit biases was that accomplished or successful Africans, like the ancient Egyptian pharaohs, must have had a light skin tone. Needless to say, when a 17-year-old Cheikh Anta Diop encountered these depictions of the ancient pharaohs in his Senegalese high school, which taught French curriculum, he had some major questions. To Cheikh, a black boy born in Senegal, it seemed obvious. The Egyptians were Africans. Thus, they must have dark skin tones, even the successful ones. Why were all of the pharaohs in his textbook light-skinned or straight up white? Could this truly be accurate? How could we ever know? Cheikh had to know. After receiving his diploma, he hopped over to Paris, France to complete his doctorate in anthropology and chemistry. There, he published his doctoral thesis about African nations and culture. One problem? He could get no professors to assemble a jury due to a lack of interest. leaving without his doctorate, Cheikh nevertheless charged ahead on his own into his ultimate question. Could the pharaohs have been black? That's an easy question to answer. Just snatch a DNA sample from a mummy, look at the genes deciding skin color, then write the paper. Bada bing, bada boom, Cheikh gets his overdue doctorate, Africa reclaims history of excellence, the world celebrates this unique finding. Happy ending!
Problem. Remember how paleogenetics didn't come about until 1984? The year is currently 1954.
Luckily for Cheikh, pre-paleogenetics does exist. Mostly. What does that look like? Well, first, it looks like pharaonic iconography. And that's just a fancy word for portraits of the pharaohs. It seems like a picture of someone would be a pretty cut and dry method to determine skin color, right? Not exactly. Pharaohs were the most powerful people on the planet at that time, and could order their appearance to be painted a different way. Fatter or skinnier, darker or lighter skinned, to match how they wanted to appear. So, these portraits, while insightful, could not be 100% relied upon. They needed to be backed up by more solid evidence. So next, Cheikh turned to linguistics. You might be wondering, how does language determine skin color? In a nutshell, it doesn't exactly, but it does provide insight into where the language has been or originated from. Through studying the ancient Egyptian language, which is now a dead language like Latin, Cheikh looked for influences from other, more likely black languages and civilizations to see if there were any connections. While Cheikh so far has found evidence of the Egyptian language originating from below the Sahara Desert, which has a population more known to have deeper skin tones, and that the portraits of the earliest pharaohs have arguably dark skin tones, this evidence is still circumstantial. To provide a counter-argument to European written history that will surely garner more pushback than his doctoral thesis, his work has to be airtight. Next, Cheikh turns his attention to the more scientific craniometry, the study of blood groups, and skin pigmentation. Craniometry is science using the measurement of skull bones, full or partial, to predict what a person from the past might have looked like. More specifically, did this person have facial and cranial features more often found in black people or in white people? In other words, Cheikh showed that, quote, all classes of Egyptian society belong to the same race, end of quote. It seems obvious to us today. After all, why would more successful Egyptians like pharaohs have lighter skin, while the workers and lower class have darker skin? Egyptians are Egyptians. But then again, according to a January 2023 study in French people aged 18 to 24, 1 in 5 believed that the Egyptian pyramids had been built by aliens. Maybe it isn't as obvious as it should be. The point of Cheikh Anta Diop's research on a scientific level was to correct the implicit bias that successful people could only be light-skinned. He then applied this research not only to the Egyptian pharaohs, but to Mansa Musa, the African emperor worth $400 billion today, or double that of Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos combined, and the world's richest man ever. He also applied this to Abu Bakr II, a later emperor of the Mali Empire who is evidenced to have voyaged to the Americas before Columbus and established the first colony in Brazil. All of these African figures were excellent, and now, thanks to Cheikh's work, all of these African figures are reclaimed as black. This research caught the attention of the French University, and after 10 long years, they finally granted Anta Diop a doctorate for his thesis. So, why are we telling this story today? A myriad reasons. 1. I just got back from Senegal. Woohoo! 2. Wednesday was Juneteenth, so happy belated Juneteenth, everyone. In addition to being home to one of Africa's greatest anthropologists, Senegal was also home to the biggest slave exportation outpost, one of the places I had the solemn privilege to visit, known as Gorée Island. 3, as you might have heard, we were recently permanently banned from TikTok for celebrating Pride during Pride Month. While we're not claiming our silly videos are anywhere near the quality of Cheikh Anta Diop's work, recently I found out that his research is actively being banned in 18 US states. 2018, most recently being Florida's governor banning the College Board's AP African American Studies from being taught in any Floridian school. Although Cheikh's work is not directly included in the curriculum, he is the father of Afrocentrism, or world history with an African presence, which is included in the curriculum. While our democracy has always been one of freedom of speech and in opposition to censorship, when those rights are tested in society, the reality is quite bleak. Very real and very staggering loopholes exist which continually and successfully silence minority voices, even when they are the voices of objective science, like Cheikh in paleogenetics. So, that's what we're doing today, playing a small part in the greater whole of telling the truthful and scientific stories that scared, small people try so hard to cover up. We tiny humans are frightened by things that we can't control, or things that are new and not fully understood. That's okay. That's natural. Per paleogenetics, that wariness, that suspicion of the unknown is what is programmed into our very DNA, what has helped keep us from being eaten by lions or bears for so long. But the reality is, for the vast majority of us, we don't need it anymore. In the US majority, we live in cities, far from dangerous wildlife or famine or other threats that our ancestors evolved their wariness from. And in lieu of obvious threats, we instead direct that wariness towards people, towards our neighbors, towards anyone who looks or acts differently from us. I know, I do it too. It's implicit bias, nothing to be ashamed of. Just recognize it, then let it go. It doesn't serve you anymore. And who knows, that person you said hello to instead of glaring suspiciously at them while clutching your purse, they might be the next Cheikh Anta Diop. That's our show. Stay curious. Keep taking delight in small differences. Take care, small anthropoids.